Hi folks, this is Dragon, just another video. We're going to head off down to the creek at the back of Bob's place in a couple of minutes. We dropped a yabby pot in down there just to see what's in there. I'm fairly confident there are yabbies in there. If I can just run this down to the bank, there are actually holes in the bank where you can see just there. So that's a fairly good indicator that there's yabbies in the creek. This is another one of these creeks. It's in a rural area. As I said in a previous video, water in Australia be pretty hard to find in most places. Now, this creek isn't flowing at the moment. January this year, this creek was in full flood. In fact, Bob's property was completely isolated, and thankfully he was very well prepared for it on a national disaster level. The problem with this creek is there's a lot of farmland around here. They use pesticides, fertilisers, a lot of history in this place, again, going back over 100 years. Back in the days when they were using DDT and dieldrin and all that sort of good stuff. And of course other heavy metals such as lead capping, plumbing and all that sort of stuff. So when creeks like this flood, they've run over farmland, all this chemical and stuff runs off into these creeks. And to some point it'd be residue in the mud, the banks of the creek and in the water. This creek at the moment isn't running. It's a very deep waterhole. A couple of miles up to my left, to the south of here, there's a couple of feedlots. All the effluent from that runs off into this creek. So again, in the bush, the water might look clean, but it isn't. So something to think about sterilising the water. A lot of farms around here went underwater in January in the floods. They're all run on septic tanks. So all that finished up in this creek somewhere along the line. Now to my right, it goes quite a distance up into bushland, so if I was up in that bush and came across this creek, I wouldn't even know that this was here on farmland. Completely unaware of what maybe have been washed into this creek. So a bit of information for you folks, something to think about with regards to water safety and sterilising. Just as a bit of a sideline here in the Australian bush, this tree here is what they call the apple gum. It's a native. Where you find these, you generally find good water, either in creeks or in underground supplies. They're all around this area. The farms around here have their own irrigation systems, but they use big three-phase electric pumps. So in a homestead situation, worst case scenario, getting water to crops, and the biggest thing is getting enough water to crops, is a problem, because let's face it, you won't have three-phase pumps pumping out of the ground for very long. The apple gum, the dry wood from that, does burn, but doesn't burn very well. It doesn't give off much heat at all. It's absolutely not very good wood to burn. It's not very much good for anything actually. But there it is folks. So if you're wandering around the Australian bush for Australian members or anybody visiting from overseas and you see these types of trees, see if I can get a close up for you. Type of bark on there. They're called apple gums. So where you find those, there's usually good sources of water somewhere, either a creek line or underground. Just how far down, who knows. The water table around there, it's in a small valley, so it'd be fairly shallow. Alright folks, we'll head off down to the creek and see if we caught anything in the yabby pot.